Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official pitcherless podcast for starting pitchers. That's not what Eric says every time. I am your host, Nick Pollack, and joining me is the wonderful Eric Samulski. Eric, look at this! Look at this
Nick,
little
what a role! What a role reversal! How did that feel for you? How did that feel?
I kind of love it. I don't know. I just get to sit back and be like, I don't know. It's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eric, for being a part of PitchCon this weekend. You did a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If anybody missed it, I talked about the importance of new pitches, how we can determine if they're important, when they become important, why, tips for drafting. Obviously, that will all be available, I believe, on the YouTube channel coming up,
yes.
or playback.tv, all of that stuff.
Everybody watching right now on YouTube, or if you're just listening, you should know that all PitchCon panels from 2020 are actually on YouTube. You can go through and watch all 44 hours of PitchCon on YouTube. Find the ones that you want. There are playlists. Just go to youtube.com/pitcherlist and you will see them. And that means all the things you might have missed. In the Deep had a reunion episode, and you should watch that one on YouTube. I'm telling you right now, so much better than if you listen to the podcast version. We have Michael Govier's baseball happy hour experience, baseball power hour. I don't remember what it's so good every year. Look at the ones from the past years too. And we have fantasy baseball sleepers and ADP battles and prospects to target and tips for your dynasty leagues and just so much for 44 hours. I actually did my top 100 pitchers in 50 minutes. That's based on NBC data though, and they got it wrong. So but go check it out on our YouTube channel. And also, of course, if you want to support what we do, go get PL Pro Lifetime. It's open. We don't open it much. We only open it for about like a month or two and at a time. And you can get PL Pro for a one-time subscription, and that's it for life. You can also get free merch as well. Hall of Famer is what it says on it. So it's up to you guys what merch you want to get, but you should really consider supporting us. We have so many fun things that we are putting out, which we also announced during PitchCon. You should definitely go watch that one. As PL11 arrives later this month. Enough plugging, though. Hi. We've got a fun one.
You got to plug. It's okay.
It's okay. Eric Samulski. I love this. This is the second year in a row you've done this. This is how much of a veteran team we are now at OTC. Eric Samulski's second season. Oh, man. Second full year in the seat. We're going over. I do a top 150. I can't quite get to your 200, 400, whatever, even though this will probably balloon by the time the season starts. That's the thing is, like, Eric, you could do a top 400 because your process is like mine. Mine is going through every single team in full. And at the end of the day, there are 400 guys to talk about because prospects are included.
Once you get to like 200, you're like, this guy here, that guy there, whatever.
Well, it's all bucketed. You know this. It's just true. Like literally some of them are like fringe starter and he might be good fringe starter and he's not very good. like, I guess he'll see some starts, like the Rockies have a tier,
sixth starter on a good team, sixth starter on a bad team.
Right. You're a prospect that we will forget their name. You're injured. You won't be here. I don't know why I'm mentioning this, but you should know, I guess he won't be here this year. That's the kind of stuff. But we got 150 from Eric Samulski. And props to you for putting this out. I pressure you to do this. And you're like, oh gosh, I don't know if I can get it done. You did. And I know, guys, everyone, it's subject to change. When Eric Samulski posts this on NBC, Roto-World, it likely will be different in some places. Maybe even during this, we might get a change of heart here and there.
It happens every year.
Eric, I have not seen this yet. And before I even look at it, I just see kind of that you have things.
Yes.
Tell us your process with this and what we should expect.
So it was a similar process to what you did last year, what you convinced me to do last year in terms of the tiers, and I found that to be really helpful. While you come up with very clever names for your tiers, I come up with things that are like very specific to how I might draft in a particular draft, like injured and injury prone potential aces, fringe aces, high-end SP2s, and then like later down you get things like fun arms with downside, solid veterans without much excitement. Like it's like pretty specific so that I know when I'm looking at my draft and I get to my solid veterans without much excitement, if I don't want that for my rotation, if I want upside, it's like, cool, I'm just going to skip this whole tier and I'm just going to go to other tiers that are like, the tier that's like if they can just put it all together. It's like, cool, those are upside guys. And so that for me helps when I'm drafting, and we've talked about this a lot, say like, okay, yes, this guy is higher, but that doesn't mean I would take him above pitchers below him every single time. It's going to depend on where I'm at in the draft and how the rest of my rotation looks. And do I want to swing for that upside? Do I want to go for somebody safe? Am I in a 12 team? Am I in a 15? Stuff like that. I used a little bit of my last year's rankings as a barometer to kind of see, what I have historically thought of pitchers. And then I created like a little leaderboard for myself of some of the stats that I really like in terms of Sierra, strikeout minus walk rate, swinging strike rate, things like that, to see like, okay, who last year was elite at the things that I really value in terms of starting pitchers. And then I didn't just say like, these guys were elite, so they are my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Sure, yeah,
I said, how much do I believe what they did? And then how much can I kind of like count on a replication of last year? If I don't believe it, I kind of started to move them down a little bit, but I wanted to see who was ticking the boxes for me in their recent seasons.
This is a thing that we actually talk about a lot, Eric, you and I, about what is the process to assess a pitcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what is interesting to us is not always interesting to other people, and I get that. And it's actually just getting highlighted to me. Like, I don't make a leaderboard. I don't have a leaderboard of performance from 2024 that I'm using. Like, I don't have, here's my K percentages leaderboard, here's my PLV leaderboard.
Right.
And I understand why people do. I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. But hearing conversations a lot, there's something when we say of like, there's a different, there's what I think is really fun is that you can listen to multiple people talk about starting pitching, because the way that we do it is different than I think a lot of other people do. And a good example of that is I see a K rate go up, right? And what do we both do when we see a K rate go up? It's not like, the K rate went up.
Right.
It's
Why?
there.
Were there any changes? What happened?
And exactly. And it's not about the final result of it. Like, I don't care about what the Sierra is, the XFIP is. I'll touch on like BABIP and everything like that. I get that. And I just see 100 greens homer per 9 last year and go, well, okay, no. But then I go, cool. What was the pitch that dropped in homer per 9? Right?
Yeah.
Why did that pitch drop in homer per 9? Is it fastball went up? Did he change his location on that? Then you might actually say, like, oh, that's why he had a lower homer per 9. It's not just something that just normalizes, right?
And some of it is also specific to the pitcher and your trust in what they're doing. And I don't want to
Exactly.
I don't want to spoil somebody we might discuss later. I don't know I have no idea who you're going to want to talk about, but I had what I thought was an interesting discussion online with a buddy of mine who used to be at Rotoball with me, Frank Amiranti, and he was talking about Hunter Brown and where he had Hunter Brown ranked. And I mentioned I had Hunter Brown ranked lower than he did. And he just said, why? Look at what he did in the second half. And I said, well, yeah, look at what he did in the first half of 2023. And then he tweaked his pitch mix in the middle of 2023. The second half of 2023 was terrible. And I just said, for me with that pitcher, it is I see it. I don't trust it yet because I have seen it previously, and then he has tweaked and changed. And so that you also have to add in your personal gut reactions, feelings, trust of a particular player, pitcher, etc. And that's going to make, pitching rankings way more subjective, I think, than hitter rankings, right? You and I lean into innings pitched risks differently than other people might. And so we might have guys higher up on the list and other people may have them lower. I may have Hunter Brown lower on the list because I've seen him flash skills before and then change what he was doing. And to me, I don't yet feel like he is a pitcher who has settled on who he is. So I don't trust him as much as I might trust, somebody who I've ranked ahead of him. And another person drafting may trust him. And that's fine. And, we're not trying to say, hey, your ranking is bad. It's just, this is my ranking. This is why I'm ranking him there. And then you can decide if you kind of agree with my thought process or not. And then that determine where you rank a person.
It's the okay, cool. What is the change that you expect, right? And a lot of times, and I think the hardest one that we do is saying this is a younger pitcher, and we expect them to find an area of growth. And it's harder for me always. I imagine it's for you too as well to say like, all right, I'm going to bank on him learning a new pitch or getting a better feel for this or increasing the strike rate on that thing or whatever it is. And that's the hardest one, I think. The one, and that's really the important thing about this is that I think having the focus on the arsenal allows for a lot more weights than just the ERA being different or the strikeout rate being up or down or the walk rate being whatever it is, because then you can really say like, okay, well, he's had moments of the slider being really good and the slider being really bad. We've seen things fluctuate. Like, this is a real fun discussion of how does a pitcher change over time.
Right.
And I love that I get to have that conversation a lot with you. So it's why I don't touch leaderboards as much, because it's just, that's the high level of it. And there certainly have been times when I've said, well, I say all these negative things, but he still had this kind of whip at the end of the day. So like, all right, maybe I should be more favorable. And then, then all of a sudden the whip goes way back up. And it's like, that's the, right. Like, I shouldn't be doing that. I should be saying, well, what was the whip? It was the ICR was high or low and the strike rates were here. ICR equates to hits, guys, and strike rate equates to walks. It's that easy. Also, team defense is one of the things that I'm trying to incorporate more than I usually do, because team defense just affects hit per nine, guys, and left on base rate and BABIP. It's like
that's my 2 years ago Sandy Alcantara argument when I was like,
look at that. Well, Xavier Edwards is that short, and I don't know how to feel. All right, so let's actually get to these rankings. I know we've really strung you guys along, and I'm going to tell you right now, I don't really care about Eric's top 20, okay? Because we talk about this so much. About like, oh man, I want Michael King over Logan Gilbert. And by the way, I love the fact that you have Logan Gilbert at 8. Thank you so much. People are just overdrafting Logan Gilbert right now. The fact that he's above Greg Crochet is just wrong. Anyway, I like Logan Gilbert. Don't worry, get me wrong. It's fine. I love it.
Michael he's in both of our top 10. So it's not like we dislike him.
It's just funny to me. That's all. But it doesn't matter because honestly, you and I don't think outside of an auction draft that I'm going to have much of the top 10 or 15 really. Maybe will say as an one at the 15 side, but
in a 12 team in a 12 team league, in a 12 team draft, 12 team draft and hold draft right now that I'm doing on NFBC. It's my first draft of the year. Because it's a draft and hold, it's a little bit different. I did want to make sure I drafted a starting pitcher earlier because again, you can't use waivers, but I waited till the 5th round of the draft and I took Michael King and he was like the 11th starting pitcher off the board. And I felt comfortable taking him as my top starter. I waited. Good. I got 4 really good hitters, and I said, okay, let's dive in here and take somebody. And so, would I do that in a normal 12 team? I might wait a little bit and see if I could get some of the guys I have, between 12 and 15. But we'll go from there.
Sounds great. So let's do this. I'm just looking at this and like, I could maybe bring in conversation, but you have Shohei Ohtani at 16. And I don't know with the Dodgers, how they're doing it. He's not going to be in the IL for May or for April. So that's actually a roster spot stash that you have to have, which has me. I know I put Shohei in like my top 10 initially. And I was like, oh, this is really dumb.
It is obviously Shohei is obviously league dependent, right? Because obviously, if you're drafting him in a place where you get him as a hitter or a pitcher, it doesn't matter if he's not pitching at the start. If you split it like in a Yahoo format, then maybe you don't want to take him. I mean, obviously, if it's not split, you're probably taking him first anyway. They think they said he's gonna be on the mound in May. Maybe that means end of May. Maybe that means June. Who knows? But I still think something in like maybe the 130 innings for him feels
so. I'll put it this way though: you have Tyler Glasnow at 30, and how you have this ranked in tiers is Fantasy Aces is 1, then starting at 7 is Ace-ish, which is good. Then injured and injury prone potential aces like 12 to 17, fringe aces, and then at 21 it's high end SP2s, and then it's upside potential aces with risk. So that is where Glasnow is at 30. And I'm going to make the argument that I would rather have Tyler Glasnow than Shohei Ohtani. And for that is because when Glasnow is not playing, it's an open roster spot. But when Ohtani isn't playing, it is not an open roster spot. And this is only for leagues, of course, where Ohtani is separate as a starter.
And I get that. My thought is right now, Glasnow ended the season hurt and then didn't have any surgery or anything to correct it. He has just been like working on his mechanics and said he feels great. It just gives me a little bit of pause because we've obviously seen so many injuries from him in the past. And the fact that He got hurt again at the end of the year and then did nothing surgically to fix that. We're hoping that rest and rehab and these mechanical tweaks he's talked about with, like, where his front foot plants and stuff like that, we're hoping that that will help him to regain some level of health. We've talked about this in the past. I weirdly feel better with the pitcher who has had his arm surgically repaired and is going to be 15 months removed from that surgery, 14 months removed from that surgery, than a guy who had nothing done and has historically been injury prone and says he's, fixed it through mechanical tweaks. And maybe I'll move Glasnow up at some point. But yeah, that's my comfort level. It's just, I just don't trust it as much before.
Sure. Yeah, I'm really thinking when it comes to the injured guys, I actually am favorable. So for example, like Spencer Strider, I know it sounds crazy. I've been going back and forth with this, but
me too.
The logic that I have yet to really get a good pushback from is, I mean, I can tell you what the pushback is, but is that if I draft Spencer Strider, not only do I feel confident in the quality when he does return, and that's just going to be great, especially head-to-head league, my gosh. I'm also getting an open roster spot at the most important time of the year.
Yeah. Now,
the biggest pushback is we don't know he's healthy. We've seen this before. Guys like, cool, we expect him back at this point. They're not fully healthy. John Means wasn't fully healthy. Jeffrey Springs was not there, ready to go. We've seen other guys as they have a rehab that they aren't, all set. So I get that. I would put Strider in here with this upside potential with risk. I don't know if you put him, injury recovery veterans, and you kind of stuck them all together. And I totally get that. 48, 49, 50, 51, 52.
Yes. And I could see the argument to moving Strider up here. I might. I mean, right now I kind of expected Strider might be back sometime in June. We know he's not going to be ready at the start of the year, or we know he's not going to be on the mound for the Braves at the start of the year. Right. The concern for me is that we don't have a lot of data on the internal brace procedure. And he had surgery in the middle of April. So if he were to recover at the normal timeline of like a typical Tommy John, he's probably back like the middle to the end of June. And then you have also the typical Tommy John consequences of he's back, but the feel isn't quite there. So the command isn't as precise. And we talked about this in the past with Spencer Strider. What makes Spencer Strider so great is like, or what makes him so great despite having a limited arsenal is like, I talked about this on my presentation yesterday, because you and I have talked about it a lot. Pitchers need a fastball for strikes. They need a secondary for strikes. They need a secondary for whiffs. Spencer Strider's slider is a secondary for strikes and a secondary for whiffs. It does both. If the command of that pitch wavers because recovering from Tommy John, he needs to establish that grip again, the command of that pitch suffers a little bit, and then he much as he can before. Well, then him having a limited arsenal is going to come into play a lot more until he gets the command of his pitches back to where we're used to seeing. So does that happen by July? Does that happen by August? Like, it's just a lot of questions where I don't know that Spencer Strider will be bad. Like, I don't know that you're ever going to be like, oh, I'm Spencer Strider's starting and I don't know whether I want to put him on the mound. It's more Spencer Strider starting. Is he a top 5 starter in baseball, or is he a top 25 starter in baseball, top 30 starter in baseball? And if he's a top 25 guy for 2 months, right, that version of him until he gets command back, then you've taken him in the top 30 overall. He's missed the first 2 months totally. And then he spent 2 months being a lesser version of himself while he figures out the command. And so that's just the risk right now. But to your point, I also could easily see him. I have him 48 right now, around like Walker Buehler, Brandon Woodruff, Robbie Ray. I could see moving him up into the Tyler Glasnow range because he's just so good when he's healthy.
And it's also a question of that timeline is more of a typical Tommy John. Our understanding of internal brace is that it is quicker. So we will know. I mean, it is February 3rd. My gosh, it's February. If it were January 3rd, I feel really good right now. Because even though, like, I'm not trying to say I'm not looking forward to baseball. I am. I just have so much I need to get done.
Yes. It always
I need one more
sneaks up on
month.
you. Yeah,
No.
it sneaks up, for sure.
But no, we will know by the middle of March what the timeline is with Strider.
Mhm.
We will get a much better sense. And the sense is that he is returning. He's going to be pitching for Atlanta in May. Then I am going to be more aggressive, I think,
Agreed.
on this. We're going to get reports on bullpens and how he's feeling and everything like that. No setbacks. Cool. Now, I also think about last year with like Gavin Williams. I think Gavin Williams is the perfect example, and say Brian Wu too, of just both of these guys are supposed to be like a week or two delayed, and then they were delayed for like months.
And that's where I feel like
yeah.
I might not have a lot of Spencer Strider, because given how good he is, if he comes into spring and they say he's healthy and maybe he's back on the mound in May or whatever, that draft cost is going to just skyrocket above some pitchers that I think are really good pitchers and are fully healthy. And so I'm kind of like, we'll see. But I could easily see moving him up.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're going to move on to some other guys. There's a lot of, I think, interesting ones. And really, it's kind of all the same names that we know a bit in that middle crew. And we're going to talk about those a little bit, of the guys that you're favoring. There's one name or two that I think will surprise some of you. And we'll talk about that after this break. All right. So there's two that I want to mention here. One, on the New York Yankees, you have Carlos Rodon at 46. However, Clark Schmidt is at 45. I think this is the first time that I've seen any sort of display that anyone prefers Clark Schmidt over Carlos Rodon. And I wanted you to talk about that one a bit. For me, I see it because Clark Schmidt did take some steps forward last year. To me, he's more like a Holly at best that can flex that 24, 25% strikeout rate. I think that his hit ability is a little more so than Rodon. While Rodon, I'm more encouraged by the secondary development we saw in the second half last year, becoming a more encompassing pitcher that really does showcase him being that 6-inning workhorse with those 9 strikeout games. That is much more of a possibility to me than Schmidt, with a somewhat similar floor. But I want to hear it from you here. Why do you have Clark Schmidt over Carlos Rodon?
Yeah, so I changed this yesterday after I gave my presentation at PitchCon, because so much of my presentation was about the changes that Clark Schmidt made to his cutter between 2023 and 2024. And I was talking about Clark Schmidt, and I was talking about the changes to the pitch mix, and I was talking about how the cutter not only was a good pitch, but made the rest of the arsenal better. And I'm talking about how I believed in everything that he showed in 2024, and how I think that it was warranted and the skills were warranted. And then I started to think, okay, well, then I'm looking at what he did in 2024. And if I truly believe everything he did because of the changes that he made, then why am I ranking him, in the like low 50s when he actually performed in many ways better than Carlos Rodon, or at least equal to, if you think that Rodon has higher strikeout upside, but Clark Schmidt had better ratios, etc. So the long and short of it, I'm not going to go through the whole PitchCon presentation, but I encourage you, if you want to hear my more detailed thoughts on both Carlos Rodon and Clark Schmidt, who I mentioned in the presentation yesterday, check that out when it goes up on YouTube. But basically, Clark Schmidt really started to introduce the cutter in 2023, and over the course of 2023 tweaked how he was using it. So when he first started using it, it was 89 miles an hour, and he was throwing it low a lot, and it had a 49% zone rate, and he was really burying it inside to lefties. Good. We like that. Okay. In the final 19 starts, he upped it to 91 miles an hour. So he started throwing the cutter harder. He threw it inside less. He was using it all over the plate, but he was throwing it up more often. Cool. We like those things. The ICR went down to like 35% from 47%, but it lost swinging strikes. So he then has the whole offseason before 2024. And what he does is he again throws the cutter harder. Now it's 92.5 miles an hour. That's 3.5 miles an hour harder than when he first introduced it. He throws it inside now almost 11% less than when he started. He throws it high even more than he had before. And that pitch in 2024 has a 38% ICR, 17% swinging strike rate to lefties. So it gets the swinging strikes back, and it maintains the good ICR, compared to the 47% when it started.
Sure.
And part of the reason I like those things are, first of all, the increased velocity closes the velocity gap to the sinker. I like that, right? We don't want huge velocity gaps between our fastballs, because if we want the fastballs to play well off one another, we really want them kind of coming in within the same velocity pocket per se. Also, he starts throwing the sinker up in the zone more. So if he's throwing his cutter up in the zone a lot, but he was only throwing his sinker really low in the zone in 2023, he starts using the sinker up in the zone more in 2024. Now, he keeps the sinker arm side, which makes sense, right? So throwing the cutter arm side more than just burying it into lefties means the cutter and the sinker are attacking similar parts of the plate. So not only did the cutter itself get better, but then he tweaks the other fastballs in the arsenal to help them play well off the cutter. And so to me, those changes he made validate the success that he had in 2024, which, as we know, was a 2.84 ERA, 26% strikeout rate, which was a huge jump up from a 25.5% strikeout rate in 2023. So even if I don't think the 2.85 ERA sticks, I think a low threes ERA kind of makes sense. Like give him 3.2, 3.3, which is what Rodon did in the second half of 2023, when we're saying, hey, he was using this changeup way more to righties, and it was really good for him. So then that's maybe similar ratios. If you're baking in regression for Schmidt and you're not baking in regression for Rodon had the higher strikeout rate over that period of time. But I think, Schmidt as the younger pitcher making, changes and improvements, I'm willing to bank on that continuing to get better. And then you have the previous health issues with Rodon, and maybe that, comes up again. Also the fastball for Rodon really getting pummeled a little bit last year.
That's why he did switch to the.
That's why he made the more changeup heavy approach,
and that's really what he had that really good run of 5 games with about 7 total runs down the stretch or something along those lines.
So I just think when push comes to shove, I think there's a little more upside for me in Schmidt, because I just believe in the changes and the relative age and the growth. And again, right now, I don't necessarily need to draft Schmidt where I'm drafting Rodon. Over the first 13 online championship drafts at NBC, and I like using that because they're not draft and holds. So these are where people can play waivers. Clark Schmidt is going pick 234, and Rodon is going pick 128.
Well, this is why it was so stark to me. And so just to give a little context here, the last 15 games for Rodon last year was a 3.43 ERA, 118 WHIP, and a 31% K rate, 9% walk rate. That was after his really, really bad run in June, and he had to make some changes, and he did effectively. I think one element I do want to mention here is in that run for Rodon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not the most, not going very deep into games. 6 over 15 games. So that's like kind of almost 30%, a little bit more than that. However, Clark Schmidt had 16 starts last year, and only twice did he make it to the 6th inning, or actually pitch a full 6th inning. Only go full 6, only twice. And I do worry that Clark Schmidt's against right-handers, it wasn't as good as I wanted. The sinker was actually hit pretty hard. He didn't get it inside a lot. He did go upstairs with it, as you were mentioning, but it was the cutter was also hit really hard. He threw that pitch over the plate a ton against righties. The sweeper was effective, and that's great. There's still adjustments to be made against right-handers. While against left-handers, it was only the cutter that was effective. The low strike rates on everything else, sub 60% on everything but the curve, which is like 61%, and then the cutter being 67, is showing to me that Clark Schmidt isn't this overpowering guy. And I think we kind of know that.
Yes.
Like Clark Schmidt isn't the pitcher that is going to, oh my gosh, now he has a 2.6 ERA with a 0.05 whip and a 30% K rate, anything relatively close to that. Like that's just no way. We see like his ceiling as like a 112 whip with a 3.4 ERA and a 25% K rate. That's like the goal of Clark Schmidt, right? And on the other side of that, I see Rodon, and I think we can both certainly agree the ceiling for Rodon is higher, right? It is
Yes.
certainly one of a guy we've
Mhm.
seen a stud before, and we know also the floor being really bad.
Right.
I would argue that the floor of Schmidt and Rodon are actually pretty similar. And Schmidt is even one that would just not be starting. Is still a floor possibility, believe it or not.
I would say their
Yes,
floors are similar, but I think the likelihood of reaching a floor is higher for
I
Rodon
would
to
agree.
me.
I would agree. There
Um,
is a larger band in that
and
way.
I have a little bit of concern of like we just talked about how much of his success in the second half was contingent on him using the changeup more, dialing back the fastball, and we love seeing like success linked to tangible changes. But this
Yeah.
is a dude who has thrown the changeup more in the past and then stopped throwing it. He went
Mm.
from 14% in 2018 to 10% in 2019, up to 19% in 2020. I know that was an abbreviated season, down to 12% in 2021. Then basically all but removed the changeup from the arsenal. Now is bringing it back. So like I just why? Why
Because he
has
had a
he
26% swing strike rate against righties with that changeup.
But what I mean is, why has he thrown it in the past and then reduced the usage of it
Yeah. That's a good question.
previously? Is it something that he doesn't fully trust? And it's great that he
Mhm.
did it in the second half last year, but I think we just mentioned it was like 14 or 15 starts. Um, and so that when you think about it, like that's a decent sample size. It's still a small sample size. And maybe it is a pitch that he struggles with the feel for. Maybe it's a pitch he doesn't have a lot of confidence in. And that's why he has kind of reduced the usage of it in the past. So if we draft Rodon based on, hey, he had a great second half because of these changes. And then what if he comes out in the start of the season and the changeup doesn't feel great? Is he going to go back
Sure.
to being like, I don't like this pitch, and
Yeah,
then the
that's a
usage
good question.
drops?
Yeah.
And so like
Maybe
I'm
yeah.
looking at his ADP right now, and I know we want to talk about my rankings, but like Carlos Rodon being drafted ahead of Brian Wu, being drafted ahead of Kodai Senga, being drafted ahead of Jared Jones, being drafted ahead of Shane Baz, Sandy Alcantara. Like I can't do it. I can't do
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I think I'm in agreement with you that I'm generally gonna be lower on Rodon than others. Like Kodai Senga, I think actually is just more secure. And you do have Jack Flaherty at 38. I'm going to likely not have that. I'm probably going to be lower on Jack Flaherty than you. We've talked about him incessantly.
Yeah,
Uh, but I just worried too much about the heater and the precision he needed with the slider in the curve. But
he
who
was
knows?
another guy. He was originally in the two tiers below, which were like fun arms with some downside. That was in like the 50s, like the Luis
Yeah,
Heels, Nathan Eovaldi's of the world. And I moved him up because I was like, maybe I'm discounting too much of what he did last year. Maybe he is healthy, and so
mhm,
that return to health did kind of lead to some of the success.
sure.
But we've seen his results be so dependent on fastball velocity and
Yeah,
fastball success that like if that goes away, he's not gonna be somebody you really want to roster. He went back to Detroit, which we like because we know Detroit is actually building and developing starters in a way that we have kind of enjoyed.
yep,
So who knows?
yeah. We're gonna move on here. Past injury recovery veterans. I mean, it is interesting that actually that was the second one I was going to say that you have Walker Buehler. You're very optimistic, because I'm not saying that I'm going to have Walker Buehler that far apart from you. It's more that I think in the next tier, I'm likely going to favor, say, like Spencer Arrighetti
Fair.
or Nathan Eovaldi, likely above Walker Buehler. And I love your 53 too. We're going to talk about him in a moment. But why do you have Walker Buehler inside your top 50?
Um, Part of that is tiers, right? He was in a tier with injury recovery veterans. It made sense for me to lump him with those guys. I felt like maybe he goes in this tier of like, you know, can you make a leap? Can you make a change? The like Sean Manaea, Christopher Sanchez's, where like, there is, or he's a fun arm with scary downside. Maybe he is
Mhm.
next to Eovaldi. I don't know. This is for me a little bit of buying a narrative that is based on like mentality and off-field success. And I know it worked with me last year with Chris Sale. And so maybe I'm just doubling down on it here. But I do understand where Walker Buehler was coming from, where he basically said, I was struggling to really figure things out during the regular season. First year back from Tommy John, was struggling to figure things out. And he said when the bright lights clicked on in the playoffs and the adrenaline kicked in, he really kind of felt like it was a kick in the butt, and things started to snap into focus in terms of where he wanted his release point, how he wanted to be throwing, like where the mental approach of things. And I believe that. Like, if you've been a competitive athlete before, you know that like sometimes being in a really high pressure situation where you really have to dial in and the stakes are higher enables you to find a focus that you did not have before. Because when the stakes are lower and you're kind of tinkering with things and you're figuring it out, you're unable to, you're getting in your way mentally,
right,
in a way that you don't before. And so he talked about how the playoffs kind of crystallized things for him. We know he was lights out in the playoffs. If you were to get that version of Walker Buehler, that's like a top 30 starter.
Yeah.
So I think ranking him in 50 isn't even saying he's that version.
Yeah.
It's saying that version of him exists, and the version of him we saw in the regular season, I think, is probably not who he actually is. Again, organizational trust. I know that the Red Sox starting pitching faded down the stretch last year, but I think that Craig Breslow and Andrew Bailey and the driveline guys they brought over, I think they're smart. I think they will make tweaks for Walker Buehler. We have talked about how the four-seam fastball for Walker Buehler is a pitch that like really regressed for him over the years. We know the Red Sox try and hide four-seam fastballs if they can. They don't want pitchers to rely on four-seam fastballs over and over and over again. So I think that could mitigate some of the risk of Walker Buehler saying like, oh, this fastball isn't great now. What's going to happen? I do think that will come with some changes to how we see him attack hitters in spring. Maybe that's a new pitch. Maybe that's just kind of like changing what pitches he relies on. And so Buehler is somebody I'm like heavily watching in spring because I do want to see what tweaks are being made to how he attacks hitters, if it's something that I think is sustainable or reliable or not. And yeah, maybe then he drops into the Jesus Luzardo, Taj Bradley, Sean Manaea kind of tier of like guys in the 60s. But for right now, I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic.
I'm not as optimistic as you are that Walker Buehler will be that guy again from the playoffs. I think that playoff environment, there's a lot of guys that just kind of find ways to ignore their pain.
Sure.
And
but where would you, I don't think he's going to be that guy either. Let's say he was that guy. Let's say what he did in the playoffs, you could guarantee he was that. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you rank him like inside the top 30?
I don't know if I put him in the top 30. But I mean, so I pulled up, if you guys have PL Pro, you have this, which is the live pitcher list feed. And what that does is you can call up any day, any game, and you can see our individualized pitch metrics for the entire repertoire of that game. And so I'm looking at right now, this is October 28th against the Yankees in the World Series. His four-seamer, his stuff plus was good, 106.5, which is actually 100 is not even the median for that. So it's even better than that. It was the highest IVB I've seen from Walker Buehler. And like, this is a guy who used to be like 18 to 20 and really came back from post sticky stuff being like a 15 to 16. And for him to be at 17.5 in the World Series, I'm just like, I don't know. The velocity wasn't higher though. That's the interesting part. Still at 94 and change, not the 96, 97 of old either. And I'm not banking that to return. Which I do think makes him less effective in a very large way. And I say over a larger sample, I think he's not going to be a 19 whiff guy with that. The cutter placement was much better. But the curve, we actually don't like it from a PLV stuff plus perspective. But I feel like the playoff tax of that is going a little too far with Walker Buehler. Not to say that I don't want him like with Nathan Eovaldi. Like that, it's like Eovaldi is right there with Buehler. Like, I don't feel like I'm going to be hurt by Walker Buehler. That's really the only thing I'm getting at. It's like I'm actually going to be like what, like 5 or 10 spots lower. It's more that like Yu Darvish or Robbie Ray. I would think that the floors are similar, but the ceiling is higher for both of those guys actually, because I don't actually think the ceiling of that playoff is a real tangible one.
Can you pull up October 16th for a second, which was the NLCS start against the Mets?
Because I can absolutely do that.
This is a little bit of where I think we're going to see some changes. Let me know how his sweeper looked against the Mets on October 16th.
I mean, that it was good. I mean, Stuff Plus is always going to like sweepers. So it was good. This 4-seamer was 19 IVB, which also, by the way, the reports of that game in Citi Field were like absurd, and everyone was like, "This is ridiculous. What's going on in Citi Field right now? Is there something up that is making IVB go through the roof?" But even then, he was under 94 in 6.6 extension, so that's average. So
one of the things that I see sweeper in 2024 for Walker Buehler on pitcher list, 18.2% swinging strike rate, 12.5% ICR. The movement was much better than we've seen from him in the past. Really low usage, depending on, again, all of the like sweeper slider classifications differ depending on where you're looking at your data. But the sweeper was one of his least used pitches, if not his least used pitched. And part of what made Tanner Houck more successful was that the Red Sox asked him to lean into the sweeper a little bit more. And I really think that the Red Sox are going to have Walker Buehler rely less on the fastball, rely far more on the sweeper. And then, he threw a cutter like 20% of the time, I think it was. A lot more cutter usage rather than 4-seam fastball usage. And I think an increase in the sweeper usage for Buehler makes some sense because I really like what that pitch was doing in a small sample size. And so you're looking at a guy with a 6-pitch mix who could tweak. He doesn't have to add a new pitch. He just needs to tweak how he's using things before. And I think people, like, I know I'm reading all the comments, like, I think we're too quick to be like, ooh, sweeper, Tommy John surgery. Like, that's not, I think we don't really have evidence to back that kind of stuff up. And it really depends on the pitcher himself and how they grip a pitch and how they throw a pitch. And I just think we're too quick to equate those two things.
So just a quick note on the sweeper, only 8 balls in play, with one of them being ideal contact. That's why you see that low 12.5% ICR, but against righties is sub 50% strike rate, which is why you probably don't see it as much. And he threw it exclusively, over half the time, I should say, in 2 strike counts when he threw a sweeper.
Right.
So he's really just saving it for 2 strike counts, rarely put into play. And then they're chasing out of the zone when it is. Against lefties, it's more of a curve situation, which isn't a shock. And to see even this past year against lefties that the curve was the highest swinging strike rate at 12%. Everything else was under 10% for the year.
Sure.
I think that's still an issue here. That's going to be a problem.
StatCast does have 20 balls in play on 110 sweepers on the year for Walker Buehler, with a 29.4% whiff rate, etc. So again, who knows?
And we should have exactly what StatCast says. That's strange.
We can go back and look at it. I have it up right now, and StatCast has his slider with only 2 batted ball events.
I see. So we're combining the slider and the sweeper in that case. Against right-handers, then it's 11 to 12% slider usage with only 52% strikes as well. So like that's not much of an endorsement either.
It depends. Yes, it depends on how it's being utilized. But I think if you look at I think we can agree his worst pitch last year was his fastball. Obviously, playoffs aside, his worst pitch was his fastball. We know the Red Sox are going to limit his fastball, 4-seam fastball usage, because that's what they've done with everybody.
It was only 26-27% against right-handers last year. It wasn't like it was the foundation of everything they threw. He threw sinkers against right-handers and cutters and sliders and sweepers, and with some curveballs. I want to be optimistic with you, and honestly, where you're ranking him isn't asking a lot because it's 49. and it's in a crew of other things. I'm talking this out with you just because I'm trying to decide myself,
Yeah.
like where do I put Walker Buehler?
Again, he is
we'll
one of the pitchers. If I had to guess, I will move. I
up
know
or
for
down.
sure I'll move him in spring training, because
Yeah.
he's one of the guys where I'm really going to look at what does being on a new team mean for how he's going to attack hitters, and do I believe in that approach? And so yes, we won't necessarily get a huge sense if you got a 3-inning start in spring training. You don't always get a huge sense of how a pitcher is going to attack in a game. We know pitchers are working on things in spring, but we could start to piece together like this cutter is being thrown a lot in spring, which means they want him to work on that pitch, which means they would like that to be a pitch he's throwing more often. This sweeper, he's throwing this in 0-0 counts in the spring, which means they want him to be able to locate that pitch for a strike. Can he do it? Can he not do it? Well, we'll see. And that's your question of like, do you believe in it? But you could start to see what the pitcher and the team would like to be able to do based on what they're working on. It's not what they will do, because it might not work. They might not execute, but you could start to see the plan that's taking shape. And I think for me with Walker Buehler, and look, maybe he just flat out addresses it in spring training. I mean, Lucas Giolito did last year when he got to spring training and started throwing. I know, yes, his arm popped. Somebody's gonna say it in the chat, but it's like, but he basically was like, this is what they want me to do. This is what Andrew Bailey was talking to me about doing. And so we might get that information from Buehler, and that could help to, us to decide, do I believe in that approach or not?
Okay. Well, it's going to be a fun one to watch. And obviously, like, what is Walker Buehler right now is a big question. We're going to talk more about Eric Samulski's top 150 starting pitchers, getting to the back half of it, which I really think is what defines us in our drafts. Who are the flyers we are going for and how we make those decisions. And we're going to talk about that after this break. All right. So I'm going to go past the fun arms with some downside, because we talked a little bit about them. We've talked about a lot of these a ton, like Gavin Williams. I love that we're on the Gavin Williams train. Everyone knows this. Spencer Orgetti's here, Manuel Lopez, etc. You have Kikuchi down to 60. I agree. Can you take a leap? Solid veterans without much excitement. And if they can all put it together, are you in the rotation? So this is, I think, the real tough. Actually, you want to even say after that, top prospects who should pitch in 2025. I wanted you to, before I even say the names, talk about why you made these groupings, because I think it's very public about my theory of there's a Toby and then there's the upside you should chase. I'm much more on taking a chance to make early decisions, while what I see is a lot of people, which kind of looks a little bit like you, of saying, look, this is a 3.7 ERA, 115 whip kind of guy. I want to make sure I have that kind of volume in my 12 teamers. I wanted you to talk about, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it does seem like you are favoring that a little bit more than I am.
I guess it depends on which one you're talking about. I like philosophically, I don't favor that more. So okay. I'm curious. So the first one,
I guess I'm getting at is, like, for example, we have the rookies, top prospects who should pitch in 2025. We have like Jackson Jobe in there and Kumar Rocker, who I know we love Jackson Jobe, and remember Jared Jones last year. We're like, oh, maybe he does start out at camp or something like that. I would personally raise him up here, because do I feel like I need to get Nick Martinez at 87 instead of taking that chance that Jackson Jobe is going to be that guy? That's what I'm going for.
I think yesterday's signing of Jack Flaherty means Jackson Jobe is not starting in the rotation.
Fighting for number 5 with Casey Mize and Matt Manning and Kenta Maeda and Tyler Hurd.
Right. But if you're the Tigers, like, I just think you have all of these other guys, and again, somebody like Mize, who your organization has invested a lot in. I think it makes some sense to say, we're going to give Casey Mize at least the first month, 6 weeks, 2 months of the season, and see if we can, because remember, last year was his first year coming back from injury. There were moments where you were like, okay, something about this is working, and then it faded, but he's got another fully healthy offseason. I just don't see the Tigers fully turning the page on Mize. I think they can say, hey, we'll start Jackson Jobe in AAA, and start Casey Mize in the majors, see if he can put it together, and we'll go from there. Right. And so for me, I see Jobe as like a June call up. I think we're both on the same page that like Noah Schultz is probably like a June call up because
Schultz, I think Schultz has a lower chance.
I guess
I would say,
Kumar
like,
Rocker
what
could
if
be
David
in the like.
Festa is David Festa could easily be in that rotation.
Sure,
He
I
looks really
guess
good
I
out of
guess
it, you know?
David Festa and Kumar Rocker could be up in the like, are you in the rotation tier with like
Uh-huh.
Grant Holmes and Ryan Nelson, where
Right.
like if
So
we start to get a sense of like these guys are trending towards being in the rotation, you could bump them up a little bit more. I could see that.
right. So I
Yeah.
guess like some solid veterans without much excitement, right? You see like Seth Lugo, Nestor Cortez, Ranger Suarez, Jose Barrios, and Jeffrey Springs. Renel Blanco's there though at 75. I feel like Renel Blanco is like, you should be in the fun arms with some downside, because Renel Blanco killed it last year and is in the rotation for the Astros. We're kind of thinking like it's going to fall apart, and maybe it does, but we can also know, like, is your changeup still really good? And if it's not, then fine. But if it is, then he's on the Astros.
Yeah.
It's a great situation.
I think it is definitely just, I'll fully admit to my bias of being like, this guy came out of nowhere at 30 and reinvented himself as a totally different pitcher. And do I fully believe in it?
Right. I mean, that makes sense too, to be fearful of that.
I don't know. And like, I'm looking at like, when push comes to shove in a draft, like, would I rather take a gamble on Reese Olson over Ronel Blanco? Like, yeah, I might. Would I rather take a gamble on Tanner Houck than Ronel Blanco? Maybe, and maybe that's my Red Sox bias. I don't know. But yeah, I might. But yeah, I need to look at, maybe I do need to look at Ronel Blanco and see. And then the Nick Martinez thing is just like, I know, you know, he's down at 87 for me, so it's pretty low. But like, I think he's in the rotation because he's going to make $21 million next year, which seems like it'd be a lot.
That's what we said last year, and
but he wasn't making that much money. He wasn't making that
but
much
they
money.
signed him to be in the rotation, even saying like we signed him to be a starter, and then he just wasn't given the runway.
But he was good. And I know that you and I both like Nick Martinez as a pitcher. I guess maybe the downside is it's hard to see him going 3 times through an order given his history and their historical usage of him. So maybe he should be below the prospects. But yeah, I still philosophically, I would rather at this point in the draft chase the upside. But I also, I guess maybe it is a little bit of not fully leaning into 12-team leagues and understanding that guys, you know, like Seth Lugo, Nestor Cortez, Ranger Suarez, Jose Barrios, who I have in the 70s, like in a 15-team league, are incredibly valuable pitchers, and I might not want to draft Grant Holmes over those guys. And I might not want to draft like DJ Hers over those guys.
It's DJ Hers, that's fine. But
and I understand the upside, but like, you know, I think Nestor Cortez is going to be good in Milwaukee. Seth Lugo was really good last year. Is he top 15 starter in baseball good? No, but Seth Lugo is going to be good again.
Right. Jose Barrios, that's the great undulator. I know he had a really good season, but just
you basically know what you're getting, right? Like he's
I guess you do, but you don't, like, because 2023 happened. It's weird. I do also want to mention, I'm not saying that I dislike that you're giving Cody Bradford some attention. I will mention that he's a guy with a really good changeup. The four-seamer still gets hit, and the slider isn't as consistent as we want it to be. His good stretch was good. He essentially, there are pitchers, guys, that when they perform well, it's not that they demand success. They are putting themselves in a situation where they can be fortunate to have success, right? And I think Cody Bradford had that run, but it isn't something that I think, well, that is what he should be all the time. And I would say someone like Grant Holmes with 2 good secondaries, with runway now for Atlanta as they expect him to be their number 4, and as 2 good secondary pitches with a fastball that commands well on a good team to pitch for. Yeah, that is more of a sure thing, actually. That makes sense. My book, Cody Bradford.
I think the Grant Holmes thing was maybe like me continuing to wonder what Atlanta was going to do, because we know that Spencer Strider will come back into that rotation.
Yep.
If they don't add another arm, then yes, Grant Holmes has another level of security. And then you factor in, obviously, the like historical Reynaldo Lopez injury history, and maybe Grant Holmes has even more. Chris Sale for sure. Yeah, I get that. That makes sense to me.
And you say you have a Red Sox bias. However, what is Lucas Giolito doing here at 85?
I cannot get out of my head the fact that the Red Sox gain an extra year of control over him if he throws under 140 innings
Oh
on the
yeah,
year.
right. You mentioned so many times.
I
Yeah.
just to me it just makes too much sense. This is not a team with a ton of young pitching prospects coming up. It's a team with a ton of young hitting prospects. So it's not like they look at their roster and say, we only need Giolito for next year because in 2026 we have X coming. Walker Buehler's only signed to a 1-year deal. I know there's an option for a second, but he's only signed to a 1-year deal. Yes, they want to extend Garrett Crochet, but if Buehler were to leave the rotation, I don't know who you're like, hey, we definitely have this guy in 2026. I do think they probably want to keep Giolito around as an option. And so, are you oh my God, all this news is happening like right now.
I know.
As we're talking about this.
I'm putting it on the screen.
So that's what it is for me with Giolito is like, that's why he's in the, are you in the rotation tier? Because to me, these are guys where like, I'm just saying to you, some of these guys may have drastic changes in the next month if we start to know for sure they're going to be in the rotation. And maybe Giolito is one of those, but I can't shake the feeling of his innings limit.
Yep, I'm going to draft Giolito, and he says he's all good to go, and I'm going to have him. And if he's on the IL, he's on the IL. Mm-hmm. But I don't see Yuri Perez here either. And I would just be like, instead of these guys down here, where there are so many arms to go for, y'all. I mean, the fact that I'm not saying he's wrong in any way, just that Eric Samulski is putting like, I don't know, Tristan McKenzie at 102, who could be really good out of the gate. There are guys like Michael Walker and Tobias Myers down here past 100. And I'm not saying that there should be higher because, like, yeah, there's no room. And that means that you can get a guy around here that is value when he's healthy. And then you can replace it with someone who, like those guys early on.
And Yuri Perez is an oversight. He should be on here. We know he's going to be back around the All-Star break, so you're going to get Yuri Perez for the second half, which means in NFBC drafts, you're not drafting him. I mean, maybe you could take him at the very end of the draft and hold.
We're talking about your 12-team Yahoo guys.
If you're in a 12 team with an IL spot, like I have Shane Bieber on here at 99, you're drafting Yuri Perez in around the same time period because theoretically they should be coming back around the same time. Shane Bieber and Yuri Perez had arm surgery around the same time. Luis Garcia and the Astros is another one. We know he's not going to start the year, but he's probably going to be back like May or June.
Yeah,
it's like a weird nebulous thing.
I'm less excited about Luis Garcia. I think it was really just like slider cutter that was really exciting with him, and the Astros seem to have less faith in him. But like Yuri, like Bieber, for example, like those guys I feel like should be able to produce.
Yeah.
There's also like Bobby Miller, 123. I have no idea what the Dodgers are going to do. If Ohtani isn't there in the beginning, maybe they feel like, you know what, we're going to give Bobby Miller another shot at this. Maybe it's 6-man again. He does fill in instead of Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin. I have to say, like, look, you got to throw him into like the top prospects who should pitch in 2025 at the very least, or maybe are you in the rotation really, right? But I do want to say quickly, Jackson Jobe has one less guy to compete against to get a rotation spot in Detroit. And Alex Faedo,
he wasn't really they had moved him to the bullpen though.
I know. I'm just messing around. Do you think Alex Faedo is going to turn to the next big thing in Tampa Bay?
I would need to not as a starter. I really don't think as a starter. But then again, I mean, I guess they made Drew. They made Drew Rasmussen. Listen,
Kyler, when T-Lex, Tell Alexander.
Right. They made Drew Rasmussen was a reliever. They made him a starter. Springs was a reliever. They made him a starter. Faedo was a starter who was turned into a reliever who they could easily make a starter again. I will say that like when Faedo made his debut, I was like, this slider is kind of fun, man. Like I kind of dig this slider.
Just so everyone knows quickly, the slider is the thing with Alex Faedo. A 19% swing strike rate against right-handers last year. It is actually pretty surprising for me to see that the fastball also had a good swing strike rate at 16%. Yes, more so as a reliever. It is not a stuff pitch. 6 feet of extension, 94 miles per hour, 16 inches of vert, which is a steep-ish attack angle. Like this should not be that kind of pitch. It's more so that the slider was thrown more than the four-seamer, that it became a surprise There was also a changeup. Then the changeup can be very good for a Faedo. Wasn't good against right-handers, but against left-handers, that changeup was more of a weapon. We've seen it be productive in the past. It had a terrible 10% put away rate last year against lefties. That has to get better. But the slider still performed well against lefties for Alex Faedo. 68 to 70% strike rate, nearly a 20% swing strike rate against lefties. So I think that's what the Rays see here. They see an incredible slider. Maybe the changeup gets better. Maybe they turn him into a sinker guy for right-handers. I'm not sure. But that's the deal here. I'm not going to chase Alex Faedo. But if you're in a draft and hold, what the heck? Maybe there's something here that the Rays figure out.
Yeah.
All right.
I like that. I mean, we'll see. I mean, listen, we were on here a couple weeks talking about whether the Rays were going to make Mike Vassell a starter. So I think we could say the same thing about Alex Faedo.
We are going to do just one last hit on Eric's top 150 starting pitchers. We're going to do that after this break. Okay, so young starting pitchers who could make a leap. This is around 90 to 100 or so. And this is an interesting list because honestly, let's be clear. This is Eric Samulski's top 150. So of course, you're going to have Luis L. Ortiz leading the way with the Guardians. And it is interesting because you have Brady Singer with the Reds now. You have Detmers and Jose Soriano. Sean Burke and Ryan Weathers. And I wanted you to talk about this one because I feel like this is the tier that I make too, where I'm trying to showcase the ones that I have a spotlight on more than others, because you could have taken a lot of the guys, say like dart throw young arms, that tier starting at 120, 121 with like Zebby Matthews and Joey Cantillo, Trevor Rogers, Ben Brown, Max Meyer. You could have taken some of those, put them in here, and maybe some other the more young arms that you throw later on. So why did you choose those, Luis L. Ortiz through Ryan Weathers here?
I think, well, at least in connection to the dart throw young arms, there are guys who I feel a little bit more confident are going to get innings, right? Luis L. Ortiz, Brady Singer, Jose Soriano, Sean Burke, like Ryan Weathers. I think they are in the rotations. I think they are in their team starting rotations. I even think Detmers, right? Like Detmers probably should be in the starting rotation for the Angels.
I know, right? It's not. That's weird. That's a question. I know.
So we'll see. And so for me, those are guys who like I feel more confident than Joey Cantillo, Jack Leiter, Ben Brown, Max Meyer, who are all guys who are in like the dart throw young arms, where it's like I just don't know I don't know the opportunity that they're going to get. And then for me, these are all guys where, except actually Brady Singer, who I've never been, I don't dislike, but I've never been as high on him as other people. And I think this ranking reflects that, because I think a lot of other people are going to have him much higher than in the 90s. But all of these guys, Luis L. Ortiz, Detmers, Soriano, Burke, Weathers, well, Burke less so because he's only had 2 starts. But those are all guys who I just have a weakness for. I've watched them. I like how they pitch. I think there are things that they could do to be successful. I know they haven't put it all together consistently, but I just am like, you know what? At the end of my drafts, these are guys where I'm saying there's something inside of me that likes what they do, and they have flashed the ability to do that before, and they are going to get the opportunity at the start of the year. So yes, I'm going to take a gamble. I'm going to see how does the first start or two of Luis Ortiz in Cleveland look? What have they done with him? Is it anything different, or is it the same as what I got last year? And I'll see, and I can take a gamble there. Ryan Weathers. Ryan Weathers looked pretty good last year when he was starting. I think he's going to get a start, a rotation spot at the beginning of the year. Is Ryan Weathers a young pitcher who's going to continue to get better? Is he going to be really dragged down by his team? Is he just a fine guy? I just am willing to take that chance at the end of a draft and see what I could get out of them, because to your point, I think I'm going to see that right away. Whereas a guy like Max Meyer, Jack Leiter, Joey Cantillo, Andrew Painter, like I don't know if I'm going to get the opportunity to see that at the start of the season, because I don't know that they start the season in their rotations. And so I don't want to draft those guys over guys I think will be in the rotations.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I don't favor in rotations versus out of rotations more as that much, actually, which I know sounds shocking, but these are guys already on the fringe, and I generally just say who is the one that, if they are starting, has the most value for me
Mhm.
at this point, because these are usually the last two last two rounds of the draft or something, like last two starters I'm going for. And I can't emphasize enough, guys, be ready to drop those. How frustrating is it, Eric? The first week goes by and you're like, oh man, there's Garrett Crochet. Gosh, I really, really want to pick him up after that really good start against Atlanta or whoever it was, against the Tigers. I can't remember. And just, oh, I want to pick him up, but I can't. I've got no one to drop. I can't do this. You want to be able to. You have to have someone that is just not definitively there. And you want to give yourself essentially one spot that's just like, whatever happens the first 3 days, I've got that. Okay.
Right.
You don't want to play a yo-yo of just, I pick up one guy, he's really good. Oh no, I pick up another guy, who's really good. Oh, I pick up another guy, who's really good. And you realize that it's been 10 days and you haven't even gotten a single start. That has happened before. And you got to be careful about that. What you want to do is you want to say, even more so, this is a guy at the end of my draft. And if he does poorly, I know the person I'm going to pick up who's the 4 and 5 now. So this is how I frame my rankings a little bit. It's not for everyone. It does encourage you to be quick on it. You should read my SP roundup. You should listen on the corner that Monday. Absolutely. We will help you guys with that. But those are some of the interesting ones here. I do want to also focus a little bit on veterans for deeper leagues, because I see these and I see some of them that I'm just like, I know I'm not going to draft. Right. I'm not going to draft Chris Bassett. I'm sorry, Chris Bassett.
Well,
it's not going to happen.
You know, I'm not too, because I never do. And I feel like,
well,
ranking Chris Bassett at 104th, I'm never going to get him.
The thing is, though, I might consider Merrill Kelly, because he will go the opening weekend.
Sure.
And I could get a good start out of that one. I feel like the defense behind him would help him with that. Severino, probably not with the Athletics. Jameson Taillon with the Cubs. You guys know I love Jameson Taillon as a human. For fantasy baseball, he just isn't a strikeout guy. And it's just not, it's too boring for me. Mitch Keller, never. I can't. Nope. Okay. Eduardo Rodriguez, honestly, that's a very interesting one, because it may be a smooth transition in. Maybe he's okay now. None of the stuff. Zach Littell, I can't do that one. Right. It's not going to be 6 innings. Michael Wacha, sneaky. Michael Wacha is a very good pitcher. And if he's doing his thing with changeups and everything, I'm cool with that. Now, Tobias Myers is here. Why do you hate Tobias Myers, Eric?
I don't hate Tobias Myers.
What's he doing down here and not with Sean Burke and company?
Let
it out. Come on, Tobias Myers. What do you have against him? He's a young dude.
I don't love pitch to contact pitchers. I really don't.
But he's yes. Okay, so you're right. He is not one of those flamethrowers that we normally see. That said, I wouldn't call Tobias Myers pitch to contact quite yet. I wouldn't write him off as just that's who he is, because he has a changeup that I know it's the typical one I mentioned on Fireside, but it's an Estrada changeup. Okay. And when we see an Estrada changeup with a guy who has good vert on his four-seamer, generally good command, who has a deep pitch mix, who's going to be in his second full year in the majors, and he's in a good situation, I think it's good to pitch in Miller Park, actually better than people think for IVB. I'm kind of like, I want to see how this goes.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying there. Jerome Montgomery, fine. Tyler Anderson, fine. Tyler McGill, oh, I wish. But no, he's not going to do it.
If they hadn't signed Clay Holmes and Griffin Canning and also brought back Paul Blackburn. And
where is Clay Holmes? I think you put Grant Holmes and thought you put Clay Holmes too.
No, nope, Clay Holmes is an oversight. So yes, Clay Holmes needs to be added to this before I go.
Where would you put him? I would think, and looking at yours right now, I would put him in that if they can put it all together tier.
I was gonna say the tier below that, the are you in the rotation tier, but
yeah, that's fair.
We're basically talking about the same thing, because.
But don't you dare draft Bowden Francis.
Well, listen, again, I have Bowden Francis 80th. If they can put it all together, and again, I don't think I'm not getting Bowden Francis 80th, but I would take a gamble on Bowden Francis at the end of drafts and 12 teamers, because again, same thing. You're going to just see how the first few starts go.
I'm with you there.
Maybe he starts the year on the same run that he had the end of the year, and you're like, cool, I banked a month, 6 weeks of great starts, then it falls apart.
Don't you love when
can I ask you a question?
Oh, of course, but I'm going to say really quickly, don't you just love the first week of fantasy baseball? Everyone's like, oh my God, this one guy had a really good start. Like, oh, what is wrong with you? Why didn't you have him ranked higher? Or in the reverse, oh man, Bailey Ober just got destroyed. Man, Nick, what is wrong with you? How
Yeah.
did you do this? Oh, guys, I can't wait. Thank you so much for all of those messages.
Yes, it's our favorite. Please send them as much as possible. I currently have Max Scherzer
Yeah.
ranked 98th because I put him in the workload concerns with upside
Sure.
tier. It's like with, it's with the guys who are going to be out for half a season, like Yuri Perez, Shane Bieber, etc.
Mhm.
With Justin Verlander.
Yep.
I just don't know what to make of that. He's 41 years old. I don't know that there's going to be any health to speak of. But yeah, if I was going to get 120 innings of Max Scherzer, I'd have him much higher. I don't know, man. I don't know where I come down on this.
This is actually pretty simple, Eric. Max Scherzer. Let me put it this way: in the last 4 years, Max Scherzer, his highest WHIP was last year at 115. Okay, when he pitches, he's actually still a productive.
He's
pitcher.
still good. Yeah,
and if you, at the end of the draft, if you're literally just getting a streamer for 1 week that is productive, you've won. You've got value on your team, guys. Do not overvalue your last pick as someone that's going to stick around for the year. So I'm great on Max Scherzer. I'm like, sweet, he's going to start, and it should be good enough for me and my fantasy teams. And maybe he's doing that whole veteran thing. He's just great through the year, and that's awesome. He likely will go the opening weekend as well because it's going to be Gausman and Scherzer, I imagine. Maybe Barrios in there too, but then Bowden Francis and Chris Bassett, right? Like you fit Scherzer, I would think, in the middle of that, the latest. So that's good too. If it's just like really bad, all the stuff metrics are lower and everything. Okay, fine. But I'm doing that with Verlander. I think Verlander is actually great for a 15-teamer. I think Verlander is one of those guys that just like, as long as he would retire before he's bad. And the same thing with Scherzer. Like the second that they suck, they're gone. They don't want to go off this way. So I would feel fine, especially in the situation with the Giants. He's a Toby to me, Justin Verlander, through the year. And it's just like, do I want that on my fantasy teams? Honestly, I think I do. And I'm probably going to have him around the, like the Jose, wherever I have a Jose Barrios, you'll also see Justin Verlander.
I just moved Verlander as we were talking into the solid veterans without much excitement.
Yes.
Which is like the Jose Barrios, Ranger Suarez area. And I think I'm going to move Scherzer into the like injury recovery veterans, which is like my Walker Buehler, Yu Darvish, Robbie Ray tier.
Oh man. So above like Reese Olson, for example, for you.
That's where I'm saying, I guess I could put him in the 70s also with Verlander.
I would put that. Yeah, that's where I think you would do it. Maybe I would put like where Grant Holmes.
I just think Scherzer is better than Verlander right now. But I guess that's kind of like start of the tier, end of the tier type of better.
I think that's really a question of what do you want? Because I think even if you look at 71 through 75 versus 76 and 80, 76 and 80 is more about like, I'm trying to find a top 50 pitcher, but the chances I don't know. However, 71 to 75 is like, good. I have something that I trust, and I still have 3 more SP spots to fill. So I need to have one more guy here that like is fine. I can just slide him in and I'm okay. Right. So it depends on what you want. Scherzer's in the, hey, short-term kind of thing, and Verlander's more for the long-term, which is weird because Verlander's older. But let's be honest, we kind of trust Verlander just to be like, this is what I do.
Yeah, I think do you not trust Scherzer to be better when he's pitching?
I think it's going to be somewhat similar. Somewhat similar. I mean, I think there's more strikeouts from Scherzer, but I feel like Verlander's honestly a better ratio guy with the Giants than Scherzer is with the Blue Jays.
Okay. Last one. You think I'm crazy having Jordan Montgomery at 113? I mean, I was down on him.
Because
I was down on him last year, but I was down on him in like the 60s or 70s. I mean,
I actually think you're thinking correctly in that we've completely said he's just nothing now, which is not true. Like this pendulum keeps swinging here. And Jordan Montgomery, with the normal offseason, pitching for a team every 5 days and getting his opportunity to go 6 innings, is a productive pitcher. He's a Toby. Yeah. But for the cross of the full year, the thing is, Arizona's been like toying with him around, like, please, everyone take him, and no one is. What's going to happen, Eric? Here's the thing. I'm going to say right now, Jordan Montgomery will be in my top 100 before season starts. Why? Because a team is going to get an injury that sucks in March, and they're going to say, "Oh no, we need a starter now," and Jordan Montgomery will be that guy. Because the Arizona Diamondbacks want to get Ryan Nelson in the rotation, and they don't want Jordan Montgomery. So with
Well,
Flaherty
let's
now
hope that's-
gone, it's only
hope
Nick
they won.
Pivetta left. Like that's it, right? I don't think there's another starter that is just dependable
Right.
out there on the market. I could be wrong.
No, I think you're
Andrew
right.
Heaney, Kyle Gibson, Chris Flexen, Lance Lynn, Patrick Corbin, Jose Quintana. It's really getting to the bottom of it. So Nick Pivetta goes, I guess Quintana goes, and then what? So Jordan Montgomery should be dealt to a team, and I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I buy that. I'm keeping him where he's at right now, but I could see moving him up if his team market, whatever changes.
Cool. All right. That is going to do it for this episode of On the Corner. I am Nick Pollack, the Lion.
I am Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
And we will have so many more rankings for you across the month of February. But I'm going to go and check mine right now because I am missing so many guys.